Hey, what's going on, guys? It's your boy Tillman with another Tillman Take. Now, today is going to be a little bit different with my take, and that's because I want to really hone down on 2 points. The dangers of mental health calls for service, as well as the dangers of being ambushed as police officers. Now, today's video actually goes back a few years, and it comes to us out of Colorado when Deputy Parrish was actually killed at the hands of Matthew Reel, who ambushed them. And the reason this is important to notate is because there's a lot of dangers associated with this call. And officers did everything possible that they could have, devised a plan, try to execute that plan so that way everybody could go home safely. But that ultimately, that's not what happened. And so what we're going to do first is we're going to go ahead and watch the video. And then when we watch the video, we're going to come back and talk about those points that I want to hammer down on. Let's take a look.
It's early morning on New Year's Eve 2017. 5 officers from the Douglas County Sheriff's Department
Sheriff's Office!
are responding to a 911 call
Sheriff's Office!
from the Copper Canyon Apartments in Highlands Ranch, Colorado.
I got it, son.
Waiting for them, 37-year-old Army veteran Matthew Reel.
Matthew, come out!
He has a history of mental health issues.
Matt, come out! Matt, come out of the room now!
And unknown to them, a loaded AR-15 rifle.
Open the door! Sheriff's Office!
All right, now that we've taken a look at that video, what I first and foremost want to talk about is that the dangers of mental health calls for service. So recently, there's been a lot of talk of sending social workers to deal with these mental health calls for service. And like I said before, I understand the logic behind it. You want to send a person there that's going to be able to hopefully de-escalate a situation. But a person that's dealing with mental health isn't always thinking clearly. A person that's dealing with mental health or PTSD, sometimes you catch them at one of their lowest of lows and there is no rationale with whatever you try to talk to them about. Even the social worker will tell you that if a person is not on medication, it's very hard to rationalize with them. And so the other thing to understand when dealing with a person that's going through a mental health crisis is that it makes that person very, very unpredictable. Even for social workers, if social workers respond because they're unpredictable, you don't know whether or not they're going to have violent tendencies, or you don't know whether or not they're going to come out and be as cool, calm, and collected as can be. And unfortunately, in this night in Colorado, I think it was New Year's Eve, when officers responded to this call for service, they had already had some information that Matthew Reel was a little bit of an unpredictable character when it came to mental health. They've been out to this residence a few times. They were actually there earlier that night. And in their mind, they thought that everything was going to be fine because the roommate left went on about his business, and Matthew went back up into his room. And now later on, they received this call for service from Matthew, and so they respond because they knew that there was another disturbance. Now, anytime I've gone on a call that I know could become very hostile quickly, one of the things I like to do is devise a plan. And these deputies did exactly that. They devised a plan because they knew that when they went into this house or apartment complex, they were going to have to take Matthew out of the home so that way they can put him on what's called, in California at least, a 5150 hold, which is a 72-hour evaluation, a mental health evaluation. This is important, and this is what sounded like the only logical solution for the night, because it was going to continue to become escalatory. Now, when officers get there, they start devising a plan. They say, hey, look, you're going to talk, you're going to go hands-on, you're going to be the voice, you're going to have less lethal, somebody who had lethal coverage. The officers did exactly what we're trained to do, was to go in there, devise a plan so that way everybody can go home safely. Now, when they opened the door to the house, they're initially met by Matthew. Now, he's recording them, and this night, it didn't really seem like anything out of the ordinary for them to be filmed, because you have to understand that the new reality that officers are working in is that we always are getting filmed and recorded. And so that's not an abnormal thing. And so officers didn't really think much of it. But shortly after, when they make their initial contact, he shuts the door, runs into his room, and officers have to figure out, okay, what they're going to do now. And that's when that plan is devised to go in there and extract him from this apartment so that way they can place him on the 72-hour hold. When they make entry into the house, they notice that Matthew is completely trashed the place. Not only did he trash the place, but he barricaded himself into a bedroom. Now, this is very scary because now it creates obstacles for officers to have to get through when they're trying to accomplish their plan. And so what deputies didn't realize is that on the other side of that door was Matthew, and he was armed with an AR-15 rifle that was loaded. And so when they breached that door, what they heard was a slew of gunfire coming from Matthew, and he's shooting at the officers. Unfortunately, Deputy Parrish was almost immediately struck by this gunfire. And now officers, not only did they have to worry about trying to stop that threat from Matthew, but they also had to worry about trying to get their partner out of that apartment quickly so that way they can perform life-saving measures to save his life. There was also a deputy that actually ended up breaking a window on the second story and jumping out of it to try to jump to safety. So one of the two things that I told you I was going to highlight in this video was, first, the dangers of mental health. Recently, there was a social worker that was killed in the state of Washington when a patient showed up to her place of business and stabbed her multiple times. Again, going back to that irrational, illogical, erratic behavior that people that are going through mental health crisis present, these are the dangers that our officers are faced with when responding to mental health calls for service. The other thing that officers face is when you're dealing with somebody that's suffering from PTSD, specifically from the military, it also makes them very unpredictable. And sometimes these people have weapons. Is that a call for service that we like to send a social worker to in order to handle that call? I don't know if that is. And the other thing I wanted to highlight is the realities of being ambushed as police officers. Again, going back to unpredictable behavior, there's no way that an officer can predict an ambush. It's absolutely impossible. And that's why we train as much as we do to try to look for indicators, things that are going to give us reads, so that way we know if somebody wants to bring a fight to us. I always relate this to football because when I played football, I was a corner, and my job as a corner was to stop receivers from catching the pass and scoring touchdowns. Well, the one thing that the receiver has on me every time I'm playing football is he knows exactly where he wants to run, and he knows exactly the route that was designed and drawn up so that way they can score a touchdown. The corner doesn't know that. And so in order for the corner to effectively perform adequately, he needs to look for pre-snap indicators in order to get the best snapshot of what that receiver might potentially do. And so he'll look for things like the hands, he'll look for things like the eyes and what those eyes are doing. He'll look at body posture to see where he might run. And he does all those to try to gain whatever advantage he can so that way he can stop that receiver from catching that ball. Well, in law enforcement is very similar. We look for very pre-snap indicators so that way we can determine if somebody's trying to bring a fight or ambush to us. And so although these officers prepared as best as they could to prevent any harm from any of the officers and Matthew himself, it's still, all of their preparation still came up a little bit short because Matthew's the only one that knew what he wanted to accomplish on that night. And so when we watch this Tillman take, the two things I want you to take from it is that we got to really think wisely about how we want people to respond to a person that's going through a mental health crisis. They're not necessarily always suspects. They're patients. They're people that are sick and they need help, but it doesn't remove the fact that they're still a threat and danger to the person that's coming to that call for service. The last thing is that when an officer is ambushed, there's no way to predict that you're going to be ambushed. We can try to take as many pre-snap indicators or reads that we can to try to prevent ourselves from being a victim of an ambush. But ultimately what can happen is that you might come up short because the only one that knows what they want to accomplish is the person that's going to do the damage. And so I hope you guys were able to learn something from this video. My heart goes out to Deputy Parrish's family. My heart goes out to all the officers and deputies involved in this situation because this was just a no-win scenario from the start. So let's take and learn from this video. Let's educate ourselves as officers and as members of the community and understand that we all have difficult jobs to do in this work that we call law enforcement. Thanks again and God bless.